Well, we're now joined by Spokesman of the House of Representatives, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, and a constitutional lawyer, Festus Oguche, for a closer look at this developments. Okay, let me start with you, Festus Oguche. I mean, being a constitutional lawyer, and the question of constitutionality,
yes.
Came up, of course, from the Sokoto State Governor, Aminu Tambuwal, who's faulted the decision of the Senate to give the NCC, that's the Nigerian Communications Commission, constitutional powers to conduct elections. That's what he's saying the decision of the National Assembly amounts to. Talk to us about the constitutionality or otherwise of this decision.
Well, it is very, very clear. I think the INEC spokesman spoke some while ago, and they made some point about the supremacy of the Constitution above every other law. And it's not that anybody wants to impugn the intellectual quotients of the members of the National Assembly, but these are things that they ought to have known before going into deliberations, because they are elementary principles of law. The INEC has constitutional independence by virtue of the provisions of the Constitution, and you cannot subjugate or subject it to any other body, particularly in its operations. So the deliberations, the entirety of what they have done is a nullity, totally, completely null and void.
Okay, fine. Let's bring you in, Benjamin Kalu, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, the spokesperson of the House of Reps. You just listened to Festus Oguche, and then, of course, to Oluwole Uzi on where the Constitution places the power of INEC. I want you to address that, and then maybe you tag this along with addressing that. When you say you are creating the power to decide how to transmit election results to INEC, that you are actually leaving the power to INEC. What does this really translate to? That came out of your proceedings, your plenary on Friday today. Yeah.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I wish to confirm that the position of the honorable gentleman that just spoke now, the constitutional lawyer, is correct. The issue of the supremacy of the Constitution over any other act of parliament, like he mentioned, cannot be contested. It's very obvious. But all hope is not lost. Many might declare it a nullity and brand it in various shades and shapes. But in the process of lawmaking, there are 9 yards that we must follow, especially having in mind that we are a bicameral legislature. Therefore, if there are varied versions of propositions of law that is about to be passed, the benefit of bicameral legislature is that a second look, a review will be had on that piece of legislation or the clause that has a fault. We usually achieve this through what we call the conference committee, when we go to harmonize. I am sure that not all the clauses of the proposals of this bill that was presented before us today, as well as the one passed by the Senate, are the same. Therefore, we are going to look at it and see which aspect of it we need to adjust. The conference committee will agree on it, and I'm sure that this is one of those that will be considered by that conference committee. Coming to your question as to what we actually meant by what we passed today with regards to 52.2, we only sustain what was presented to us. You will agree with me that before now it was alleged that the National Assembly was induced, influenced to remove a particular section that the CSOs and all the rest of them saw as part of this legislation. I went around trying to educate Nigerians that they were just mere assumption, that those reports, the report was not before the parliament. I'm glad that finally it came before the parliament, and the particular 52.2 the celebrated 52-2, was there. It was not removed. It was not sneaked out like people alleged. And what we did as House of Representatives was to leave the discretionary powers in the hands of the unbiased umpire, the INEC, to decide when to use electronic transmission and when to use manual transmission. I think the situation where we are in our country at the moment calls for that. Nigerians should be happy that that was not taken away from that piece of proposal. If it was taken away, the discussion would have been different. We have satisfied the desires of the
thank you very much.
stakeholders who
Of course, would
attended to
allow
a
you
public
to
hearing.
continue to make your points, both of you gentlemen. When we return from this break on Newsnight, we'll continue. Do stay with us.
All right, glad to have you back. You're still watching Newsnight here on Arise News. We still have the spokesman for the House, in the person of Benjamin Kalu, and of course a lawyer, Festus Oguche. Glad that you're still here. Now, Festus, to you. For you, what is the difference between the position of the Senate and that of the House, and what does this really mean for our democracy?
Yes, there's really no difference between their positions. I think it's just what the House deliberated today is just an allegation of what the Senate deliberated yesterday. The debates are just like that, and it tells me one thing, that our dream for credible, transparent elections is still a mirage. We are still yet to get there because we have legislators that are very reluctant to implement or maybe ensure that these reforms and mechanisms are put on ground. What is happening currently is reminiscent of what happened in 2007 when the Justice Mohammed Uwais recommendations for electoral reforms was tabled before the National Assembly. The gentleman took one look at the document and threw it overboard. And that document contains the roadmap to for the efficient delivery of the democratic system through credible, transparent elections. The same members that are walking out today were there in the National Assembly, and they are just averse to any form of reform. And they sort of forget that what goes round comes round. Those members that are voting no today, we are very vigorous in the agitation and demand for reforms, including Mr. President. So it's just simply like that people who get into office do not want the status quo to change one bit. They want it to continue the way they are because they have fear of the unknown. They have fear of the security of their positions. I think that's the bottom line of the whole thing.
Okay, let me bring in Benjamin Kalu. Well, I mean, being a member of the House and you took that decision today, in questioning the NCC, the Nigerian Communications Commission, about the issue of infrastructure and the broadband penetration, which the NCC confirmed that Nigeria barely has up to 50% broadband penetration. But shouldn't that question have been addressed to INEC at the end of the day, who really should provide the infrastructure needed, to run elections?
No, let me start with the decision we reached today. You recall that the core issue with regards to that 52.2 has always been whether or not it was going to be fully electronic transmission or purely manual, or a combination of both. Those were the three motions that the House played around with yesterday, and when we got to 52, we had to suspend the discussion till today for wider consultation. And what was the consultation? The consultation was that we wanted expert opinion from the stakeholders of communication, and also INEC, the unbiased umpire. We invited both of them. But INEC couldn't make it. We had the NCC who came in their numbers. And we placed them under oath to give us testimony with regards to their experts' opinion on the capacity of their network infrastructure for the INEC to carry out this all-important obligation. And a lot of people desired it. But if the service providers whom INEC would definitely rely on confirm under oath that they have only 49 coverage of the nation, and we are in an era where every vote we are preaching, we are advocating that one man, one vote. Every vote must count. If we're in that era, you know that if you're going to waste the other 51% that is not captured, that is not provided for by this infrastructure, going exclusively electronic transmission might be a problem there. That was why we agreed that since the service providers could not satisfactorily convince us that that was the way to go, we rather, go ahead with what had been proposed during public hearing,
now,
and all the stakeholders input that was gathered.
Oguche says that it is what the National Assembly has done is not necessarily in the interest of democracy or the electoral process, but it's really basically for the interest of the lawmakers. What would you say about that? And who really is afraid of e-transmission?
That is a hasty conclusion with due respect to the learned gentleman there. It's a hasty conclusion to say that a country that is still battling to have technology, the infrastructure, all the nooks and crannies of the country, are opting for a combination of both manual and electronic, is designing or positioning themselves for House of Rep members or the Parliament to benefit from that decision. It doesn't hold water. I don't see how that stands in the face of the what happened today. What the decision we took. I got a call before I came here. I'm from very responsible CSOs. I wouldn't want to mention their name on air. They said, we are happy that what we proposed during our public hearing, the memoranda we submitted, was what you accepted without changing it. We did not change anything that was provided before us by the committee, by the public hearing report, and all the rest of them. How is it self-serving? It is not self-serving. It's public serving. It's a public service. What the decision we took is going to serve the public better than what it used to be. Let me remind Nigerians. The position of the Electoral Act and this discretionary power that have been left with the INEC, did they abuse it when they did Edo State gubernatorial election? Did they abuse it in Ondo State? Didn't we all acknowledge that what happened in Ondo State and what happened in Edo State was one of the best elections in this country? How come the same discretionary power that everybody thought that we should leave in that piece of legislation, we finally left it in that legislation, and we are now being described as those who did that?
I'm sure you want to respond to what he's saying, but before you respond to that, Uzi talked about the independence of the INEC. You talked about their independence. I am still left to wonder, if the Constitution says they're independent, why are they not taking that mantle upon themselves to do what you have said, what Uzi has said, that they should do? Why is the snag? What's happening?
It's simply because the independence proclaimed for INEC is just a mere paper tiger. The real sense of it, INEC is not wholly independent in the real sense of the word. Independence what was conceived under the Justice Mohammed Uwais recommendations report. Independence in terms of composition, independence in terms of finance, independence in terms of operations. And these are very, very important, because you cannot have an unbiased electoral body when it is under the manipulation, under the whims and caprices of the political elites. And that's the point. Those are the core recommendations of the Mohammed Uwais report, and we fought tooth and nail to ensure that they were implemented. If not, we wouldn't be talking about that now. But those members of the National Assembly who were beneficiaries to the 2007 sham conducted by Professor Iwu, they looked at it and threw it away. The independence of an electoral body is very pivotal to the conduct of elections, and you cannot say no to that. And you cannot just say independence because maybe you're saying that the National Assembly involved in appointing the chairman of INEC and the members.
So what to do?
Yes, go back to the Mohammed Uwais report.
Okay.
Because in that report, he made recommendations for members of civil society, professional bodies, the NJC, and all around. And the manner of their coming on board as members is quite very clearly defined. And I think that's a much more better way of handling it.
Okay, let me bring in very quickly. We have less than a minute. Benjamin Kalu, you did mention the fact that this was used in Edo and Ondo states. And if e-voting and e-registration are acceptable, why not e-transmission?
Nobody's saying that e-transmission has been jettisoned. It says it is left at the discretion of INEC. Section 67 of the Constitution, 78 of the Constitution, declared that INEC should be independent. And no authority, nobody should influence them in the conduct of their duty. And so we are giving them discretionary powers that the CSOs ask for, the major stakeholders in this country ask for. We are not reducing it. We didn't reduce it. We said, there is your power, use it. If it is good for you to transmit manually, do it. If it is okay for you to transmit electronically, do it. And I think that
all right, Honorable Benjamin Kalu, spokesperson of the House of Reps, thank you so much for being on the program. And Festus Oguche, yeah, I got it.
Yes,
thank you also
thank
for
you very
being
much. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.